Rambo, Last Blood. Get your tickets now.
While I've always loved Sylvester Stallone's Rocky series, I've never had as much love for the Rambo movies. To me, they've always just kind of been Stallone's other big franchise. It's undeniable, though, that this series has earned its place in film and pop culture history. Each of them is well made, and all have standout moments that make them worth a watch at least once. The original, just called First Blood, is a legitimately great film about ex-Green Beret Vietnam veteran John Rambo, whose extreme PTSD is triggered by a bunch of power-mad small-town police officers, causing him to snap and go into guerrilla warfare survival mode. This movie features one of Sylvester Stallone's best performances, and I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it. The other three all see Rambo entering some war zone or another, where he's gotta save a few captives and topple a small army of evil military dudes.
What do you say, John?
Even by the second installment, Rambo First Blood Part 2, things were already starting to get cheesy. Both this film and the follow-up, Rambo 3, feature Stallone in all of his mid to late 80s glory, with ample amounts of schlocky entertainment value. Just look at those explosions. Look at those muscles. Look at that hair. Now he's on a horse. Then, of course, 20 years later, we got the fourth movie, simply titled Rambo, because that's not confusing at all, and this one is an absolute gut punch of a movie, showcasing the brutality and horrors of war that you don't often see tackled in this type of high-octane action film. It also gives the character of John Rambo a satisfying ending. But does this newly released fifth film, Rambo Last Blood, give him a better one? No, it doesn't. In fact, I've gotta say that this is probably the worst one of the series.
Nothing is over! Nothing!
It doesn't help that it's pretty badly paced. There's basically no action until the last act of the movie, and everything leading up to that point is pretty cliche and predictable. None of the performances or characters, apart from Stallone himself, are all that memorable either, besides, I guess, the fact that the lead bad guy looks to me like Jon Snow's Latino doppelganger. However, the biggest problem with Last Blood by far is that it feels completely disconnected from the rest of the Rambo franchise. Like, this could have just been any random action movie starring Sylvester Stallone, and you wouldn't have had to change much at all.
You're not serious.
Oh yeah, I'm serious.
The only things about it that really make it a story about Rambo are one or two very brief bouts of PTSD and a couple of superficial details, like the fact that his weapons of choice are large hunting knives and a bow and arrow. All four previous films dealt in some way or another with the ugliness and side effects of war and the difficulties that veterans sometimes face when having to reintegrate into society. Even at its worst, the series has remained consistent with that general theme.
What's that mean?
It means my war's over.
Until now. Rather than being any sort of commentary on warfare, Rambo Last Blood is instead a completely paint-by-numbers, old man takes revenge type of movie in the vein of the Taken films. Let me know if this sounds familiar. There's this teenage girl who isn't Rambo's daughter, but she did grow up on his ranch where she and her grandmother, I think, still live with him. If it was ever explained why this girl and her grandmother live with Rambo, I must have missed it. Anyway, she calls him Uncle John, and the two have a father-daughter relationship, which is even explicitly stated at one point early in the film, in case you hadn't already picked up on it.
Uncle John!
The only family I've ever known.
So naturally, Rambo blows a fuse when this girl is kidnapped by Latino Jon Snow, who runs a human trafficking / prostitution ring down in Mexico. And it's up to him to track her down and get revenge on the criminals. So yeah, while at the end of the day this premise still functionally amounts to Sylvester Stallone running around killing a bunch of bad guys, which is always fun, this movie feels extremely derivative even amongst the other Rambo movies, which already exist in the pop culture zeitgeist as something of a shorthand for disposable one-man army action flicks.
I'm expendable.
Now, all of that said, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I didn't get anything out of this film, or that I hated watching it, and I'd say that for the most part, this film did the best it could at being a version of what it wanted to be for some reason. Whenever you've got an action movie that doesn't have anything going for it besides one guy killing a bunch of people, I'm always an advocate of squeezing every last drop of entertainment value you can from the concept by going R-rated and making it as ridiculously over the top as possible.
I'm gonna tear you apart.
Rambo Last Blood absolutely does not disappoint in that regard. It may not be as abundant or as impactful as it was in the fourth film, but the violence in this movie is absurdly gratuitous to the point of becoming downright comical by the end. It's not all just shooting and blowing people up either. There's a lot of variety to Rambo's kills this time around. One aspect of the movie that actually is a bit of a throwback is that most of the action is made up of guerrilla-style sneak attacks, something that hasn't really been a huge focus in this series since all the way back in the original, and that the sequels mostly lost touch with by Rambo 3. The third act of this movie is like a demented, super hard R take on Home Alone, where Rambo's booby-trapped his ranch with a series of homemade death traps, and the big final action scene that pays it all off is glorious. So yeah, overall, I guess you could say I'm a bit torn on this one. Was the movie good? No. Was it worth bringing Rambo out of retirement? No. Did I like it anyway? Yeah, I did. This is obviously not going to be a movie for everyone, but if you like these sorts of movies, and if you go in knowing what to expect, I think you'll be able to have a good time with it. And if you like this video, you can help me out a lot by hitting that like button, subscribing for more in the future, and ringing the bell to stay up to date on my latest videos. Let me know down in the comments any of your thoughts on this or any of the other Rambo movies, and check out some of the other great stuff I've got up here on my channel. As always, thanks so much to all of you guys for watching, and take care.